What did you like? Just to have something to drink before we begin. This is it. Maybe attention.
This thing's gonna get boisterous.
Hey guys.
I'll wait till later.
I would like to welcome you this evening. This is an informal gathering with the Parish Council and with Father Peter. When George and when David Simon came from the symposia on the Parish Council, please. On the Parish Council, he came and spoke to, and Dr. Paul Massett spoke about the pleasant trip and the encounter they have with the various speakers, among them Father Peter Gilquist, was kind of suggested that since he's coming to Oklahoma City, that he will speak to us on the spirit of stewardship in an informal way. And since this month is the month and next month part of the stewardship program, we are very delighted to have you among us. And this is some of the leadership of the parish, and I hope that they will have an opportunity to talk to you and talk to them in such a way that all of us feel comfortable.
Good.
And I want you to feel comfortable. Welcome.
Father Gilquist, before you get started, Father, the 10 minutes he talked to us at the church did not make me feel comfortable at all.
Are you here under duress?
No, I'm not here under duress. I'm here to learn.
Oh, I see.
You want to pick up all the wallets?
He made me look at myself very deeply.
Well, this is sort of an unexpected treat to be here. I was originally going to go down to Dallas, and Father Constantine, by the way, he piggybacks. You know, if he knows you're going to Dallas and he knows that trip's paid for, he'll piggyback. So I said I'll be glad to come a couple days early. And there's a parish in Fort Worth, the Holy Apostles Episcopal, where the priest is going to be ordained next month to the diaconate and Orthodox priesthood. And it looks like he's going to be bringing about 250 people in. So I had agreed to go down there and meet with him and then preach next Sunday. So I will just be in a jibby next Sunday. And he's got 3 services on Sunday morning, and a very good man. So anyhow, I thought I'll stop here, and then I'm going to be Thursday night through Saturday in Corpus Christi, and there's a new mission starting there. And got a letter today from the Methodist pastor in one of the suburbs who wrote and said he'd like to be Orthodox, so we're going to meet Friday. And this, I tell you, it's happening town after town after town. I have never seen anything like this. When we came 6 years ago, we began, after we came in, adding missions one by one in sort of an addition mode, and now it's moved into the geometric mode. And right now I'm corresponding with 150 Protestant pastors who are interested in one degree or another in becoming Orthodox. And it's thrilling. I'm just thrilled beyond words with what's happening. And all for the right reasons. They really want to come back to the fullness of the faith. They don't want something that's part Orthodox or a third Orthodox. They want to go all the way. So, as a result, my schedule has just been wild. I flew in from New York last night, Santa Barbara, threw my clothes in the laundry and packed them this morning and left for here. And that isn't normal, but there's so much going on right now. I simply can't handle it all. So it's a good time to talk in terms of stewardship, because obviously if this pace is going to continue, we're going to have to start thinking in categories we've never even thought in before. And I'm very challenged by it all. What I thought I'd do, assuming you want to sort of pick up where we left off out at the village, is I'd like to do a little thing tonight on tithing and then open it up to questions. it seems more and more that the direction that the Archdiocese wants to go, and the Metropolitan, those of you that were there, he was clear as a bell, wasn't he, that one morning, that what he'd like to do ultimately is forget about this dues system, the tray offering thing, where every time people turn around they're being asked for help, and just move back to the one mode of giving that the scriptures talk about, and that's tithing. You can read the Bible cover to cover. There's nothing in there about dues, nothing in there about raffles, bake sales. I'm not against bake sales, kind of like them. But as a means of, a traditional means of fundraising, they're just not there. And a lot of times people think, well, tithing is sort of a Protestant phenomenon. And I'm here to tell you it's a Palestinian phenomenon. The first tithe that was ever paid was paid in Palestine 4,000 years ago. And that has been the mode of the giving of the people of God ever since. And granted, in the last few hundred years in Orthodoxy, we've gotten away from tithing. And part of that is because of the political situation of the countries in which the church exists. For example, in Russia, for centuries, the Tsar would support the church. And of course, here in America, the Tsar is no longer picking up the tab. And in Greece, the Greek government helps underwrite the church, but that's not happening here. In fact, here we're helping to underwrite the Greek government. And the whole situation's changed so that now we've got to go back and look at the way things were at the start. And what I'd like to do tonight is just go back into the beginning of the whole tithe thing, and then go on up into the New Testament, and let's just talk about it. If you've got a Bible, or if you're taking notes, I'd like to start out in Genesis chapter 12. In Genesis 12 is where the Lord pays a visit to Abram. Back when before he's Abraham, he's still Abram. And he lives in what is now Persia, or Iran or Iraq, at Ur of the Chaldees, which is basically the cradle of civilization. And God makes a promise to him, and he says to him, get out of your country and from your family and from your father's house, and go to a land that I will show you. And I will make you a great nation, and I will bless you, and I will make your name great. And you shall be a blessing, and I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse him who curses you. And in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed. And the theologians call that the Abrahamic covenant, where God makes this basic unconditional promise to Abraham, that he wants him to journey to a different place. In fact, in Hebrews it says he went out to a country, but he didn't know where he was going, but it was a country whose builder and maker was God. And of course, that country is Palestine. So a short time later, he picks up his possessions and he gets his nephew with him, who is Lot. And they journey west out of this land of Ur of the Chaldees and actually do a great big arc to the north, and they go through Damascus and settle in Bethel and Ai, which is about 6 or 8 miles north of modern Jerusalem. And when he gets there, he and Lot decide they're going to part ways amicably. In other words, there was not enough land to house both of them. So they decided that they'd split up on a friendly basis, and Lot ends up going back toward the east, on the east side of what is the Dead Sea. And Abraham stays there where he had been, in Bethel and Ai. And everything goes well until there's a war. And if you remember back in your 9th grade world history course, they had those ancient city lords, and basically they were called kings, but they were rulers over these city-states. And that is the situation here, where these guys go to war against each other. And so there's this battle, and one of the kings makes a huge tactical error. He decides as he's going to head back north of Damascus, which is about 200 miles north of where Abraham is, that not only is he going to go home with some of the victory spoils, but he's going to grab Lot and take him along with him. So he takes Lot, and they go north, and of course that, there's certain things you just don't do. And one is you don't pull down the Lone Ranger's mask, you don't tug on Superman's cape, and you don't mess with Lot. And so Abraham just gets all upset, and he grabs some people and goes north, some of his servants. And they do this brilliant military maneuver up there. And at night, they part ways, and they encircle the camp of this city lord. And they go in there and just mess him up royally, and grab Lot, and they take all the guy's possessions, all of this king's possessions, and they head back south again. And when he gets down to near home, right on the outskirts of a city called Salem, which is the modern Jerusalem, he meets this man that is unlike any man in all of history. And the man's name is Melchizedek. And he's recorded both in the Old and the New Testament, but this happened about 2000 BC. And it says, Melchizedek, the king of Salem, came out to meet Abraham on the plains of Mamre. And it says he brought with him bread and wine, which is essentially an Old Testament Eucharist. And it says he was a priest, Melchizedek was, of the Most High God. And he blessed Abraham and said, Blessed be Abram, of God Most High, possessor of heaven and earth, and blessed be God Most High, who has delivered your enemies into your hand. In other words, part of that promise that God gave to Abraham years earlier, back in the Ur of the Chaldees, has now come to pass, as he goes up there and just scores this huge military victory and brings all these spoils back. And Melchizedek says that's God blessing you. He's delivered you, he says, from the enemies, from your enemies into your hand. And then the very next sentence says, and Abraham gave Melchizedek a tenth of all. And what happened was, here comes the priest of the Most High God, serves him bread and wine, blesses him, and in response, there's no other words in the text. Melchizedek didn't demand the tithe, which proves that it's voluntary. There was no education concerning it. Abraham just realized he was dealing here with more than just another political leader. This man, who was the king of Salem, was also the priest of God, and he spotted him up for 10%. Now, when you can shake down the founder of ancient Israel for 10%, now you got something going for you. And Abraham, that's the first tithe in all of history, and it did happen in the land of Palestine. And from that time on, Israel practiced this discipline of tithing. So what do we learn here? Well, number one, it is voluntary. It's a voluntary giving of 10%. Secondly, it's tied into worship, because the priest comes out there, gives him bread and wine, and immediately Abraham returns the blessing with a tithe. And from that point on, it's always been understood to be a part of worship. In other words, we worship the Lord with our hearts, we worship Him with our minds, with our bodies, all our heart, soul, mind, and strength, but we also worship Him with our possessions. And that's the first instance of it. Then 500 years later, when God spoke to Moses, He included the tithe as part of the law. But the origin of the thing is not in the law. Some people say, well, I don't tithe because that's part of the Old Testament law. Well, heck, it was around 500 years before the law was ever given. So, though it was part of the law, it did not originate in the law. And then, over in Hebrews 9, the author of Hebrews does a commentary on what we've just read and expands just a little on this. And, I think I said Hebrews 9, it's Hebrews 7, where we read, this Melchizedek, the king of Salem, priest of the Most High God, who met Abraham returning from the slaughter of the kings and blessed him, to whom Abraham also gave a tenth part of all. First being translated, this is Melchizedek now, the king of righteousness, and then also the king of Salem, also meaning the king or the prince of peace. Now here's where it gets really interesting. Listen to Melchizedek here. He's without father, without mother, without genealogy, in other words, no family tree at all. He just shows up, having neither beginning of days nor end of life, but he's made like the Son of God, and he remains a priest continually. Okay, king of peace, king of righteousness, high priest of God, without any human genealogy, and he's like the Son of God. And what do you say about him? Well, the very least you can say is that he's a type of Jesus Christ. Some scholars even believe he was an appearance of Christ in history. I think the scriptures teach that he's a type of Christ, but it's not worth arguing about. The fact is, Melchizedek inaugurated a priesthood, or at least manifested a priesthood that was eternal. And that priesthood is the priesthood that Jesus Christ is part of and that we are part of because we're joined to him. And that's critical to this whole thing of why it is that Christians tithe. See, Jesus did not come out of the tribe of Levi. He came out of the tribe of Judah. And there is no record anywhere that there was ever a priest that came out of the tribe of Judah. And the author of Hebrews says the reason is that Christ is not part of that Old Testament Levitical priesthood. He fulfills it, but he's not part of it. What he's part of is the priesthood of Melchizedek. And today, we are part of the priesthood of Melchizedek, and it's an eternal priesthood. And thus, this whole matter of our stewardship is connected with the fact that we are part of that Melchizedek priesthood. And thus we say that for the Christian, the normal thing to do, rather than all of the things we've cooked up to do modernly, the traditional thing is to just give God 10%. And by the way, a lot of the early fathers, I should have brought a couple of these quotes, I can run back and get them, but several of the early fathers speak of tithing as a normal practice within the ancient church, including a document called the Apostles' Teaching, which came out of North Syria in the early part of the 3rd century, and is just clear as a bell. The way to give to God is tithing. St. John Chrysostom wrote about it. In fact, in his commentary on Hebrews 2:10, which is that verse that we are created in Christ Jesus unto good works, he says that if under the old covenant they gave 10%, how much more should we who are under the covenant of grace give?
Saint Cyril of Jerusalem spoke
And
about
Saint
it.
Cyril of Jerusalem spoke of it. Saint Irenaeus, 190, spoke of it. And so it's one of those treasures that we're rediscovering today as Orthodox Christians. By the way, we're rediscovering evangelism. Evangelism came on some pretty hard times. But some of the greatest evangelists that ever lived were Orthodox, starting with the apostles themselves. St. Athanasius rocked his generation. St. John Chrysostom, St. John of Damascus. I mean, it's not only is it Orthodox, frankly, it's Antiochian. And so we're rediscovering things like evangelism and like tithing. And there is not a shred of evidence in the New Testament that tithing ever passed away. Why? Because the Melchizedek priesthood has never passed away. I just was in New York Saturday speaking with about 50 parish council leaders from 5 different parishes out there, all Antiochian. And all 5 of these parishes are looking seriously at just getting out of this thing where every year we decide how many people we've got that are active members and send the Archdiocese $20. And of course, there is cheating going on, there's no question about it. Father Anthony Gabriel runs the statistics for the Archdiocese. He says it's just plain embarrassing. Because you get to the end of the year and you're trying to figure out how little you can give and still be in good standing in the Archdiocese. And I'll tell you, tithing solves all of that. Because as the people tithe to the parish, then the parish tithes to the Archdiocese. And we who are part of the AEOM have done this now for years. In fact, way back in the early 70s, we felt God just flat talk to us without audibles, but just speak to us about our need to just tithe and do it the old-fashioned way. So we called on our people to tithe. I've tithed for years, and the people have done it. And then when we came into the Archdiocese, we said, well, what we'd rather do, rather than all these tray offerings and all these special appeals and this $20, back then it was $16 a year, we said to what we'd rather do is just give you 10% right off the top of the budget of every church minus the building program. In other words, obviously, a tithe can't run a building program, so that's special. But as far as all the weekly receipts and offerings, let us just tithe to you. And that's what we've done. And it's worked so well that not only, we give about, those original 17 churches give about $140,000 a year to the Archdiocese. And now, other of the traditional Arabic churches within the Archdiocese have begun to do the same thing. There are 3 parishes now that have switched over and are tithing. And it looks like the New York group is going to at least strongly consider doing so. And to me, if we're going to impact America, we have got to have the base to do it. The fastest growing denomination in America is the Assemblies of God. You've got them all over the place here in Oklahoma City. You know why they grow fast? One of the reasons is they tithe. They've got the wherewithal to pull it off. The largest growing cult in America are the Mormons. You know, part of the reason why they're growing? The Mormons tithe. And frankly, they swiped it from us. And they've got the money they need to operate, and frankly, they're shaking the country. If we're going to shake the country, we're going to have to get out of this $20 a year thing, which barely keeps the lights on, and move, I think, to the radical traditional mode of tithing. I want to do one more passage, and then let's have some questions. Malachi, he's the last of the Old Testament prophets. He prophesied in about 400 BC. And by the way, Malachi is a very important prophet because not only does he prophesy monetarily, but he prophesies concerning John the Baptist. And Malachi is the one prophet of the Old Testament that predicts that Gentiles will use incense in their worship. And Malachi 1:11, it nails it. The reason we use incense is because God wills it, and this prophet predicted it. But anyway, in Malachi 3, he says, will a man rob God? Yet you have robbed me, but you say, in what way have we robbed you? And God says, in tithes and offerings. And at that point in time, like the Orthodox Church today, Israel had quit tithing. And God called it robbery. Strong language. He says, you are cursed with a curse, for you have robbed me, even this whole nation. Bring all the tithes into the storehouse. And the storehouse there is prophetic of the church. That there may be food in my house. And then a very interesting verse. Almost always in the Scripture, when we talk about doing something for God, we're always warned never to try Him or test Him. In fact, in some places it says it's sin to test the Lord. But in this passage, it's the only verse in the whole Bible that I know of where God says, test me. He actually challenges us to do it. And here's what it is. He says, test me now in this, says the Lord of hosts, and see if I will not open for you the windows of heaven and pour out for you such a blessing that there will not be enough room to receive it. And the promise there is if we, the people of God, will return to doing what Melchizedek received from Abraham, to do what Israel did throughout her history, to do what the early church did, if we'll return to giving God 10% off the top, the Lord says that the blessing that He'll shower on us will be so incredible we won't be able to receive it all. And, without holding myself up as some great big example, I can tell you that all my adult life as a Christian, I've tithed. And, I've never made a big salary. I've always had a very, middle-class life. But we've brought up 6 kids. We have never, ever been in Hurt City. God has just seemingly opened door after door after door for us. I don't think that's the motivation why we ought to tithe, by the way. I don't think we tithe to get God's blessing. I think we tithe because we have it. We tithe because we love Him. And, if He does with me what He does with Job, that's fine. I'm going to still keep tithing. But that promise is there that if we do give Him the first fruits of our labor, that He will open the windows of heaven for us. And I tell you, I've experienced it. And then He says, funny verse, and He says, I will rebuke the devourer for your sakes, so that he will not destroy the fruit of the ground, nor shall the vine fail to bear fruit for you in the field, says the Lord of hosts. Now who's the devourer in that passage? Who is it? The devil. And you just kind of picture this little demonic Pac-Man that comes around, just gobbling up. The fact is, if we withhold what we need to give to God, the scriptures say the devil's going to get it. And I'll never forget, this shouldn't be on the tape, but I was several years ago down in Houston. That's okay. Just be careful where you play it so I don't get sued. Because I'm going to name Father Constantine Nasr as an accessory. I was in Houston talking with Bill Murray, who is the son of Madeline Murray O'Hare. And I was told that Bill was a Christian, and so when I was in publishing, they asked if I'd go down there to see if he would be interested in doing his life story. And so as we talked, it was obvious that he could not yet confess Jesus Christ as God and Lord. But he had come to believe in God. I'd call him a Godian at that point, not a Christian. But anyway, we talked, and that day I urged him to look at Christ and to consider who Jesus is, that he's not just another figure in human history, but he is the Son of God in the flesh. And we had a tremendous visit that day. And as he took me back to the airport in Houston, we sat in the car and talked. I got there about a half hour early, so we said, let's just talk. And for some reason, he started to tell about how his mother always buys everything top of the line. Goes out, needs a car, she buys a Cadillac. Needs a freezer, she gets an Amana. Needs a wash machine, it's a Maytag. In other words, always the best that's available. And he says, the amazing thing, 2 weeks after she gets it, the dumb thing breaks down. The wash machine quits, top dollar, the refrigerator quits, the car quits running. He said, I've never seen anything like it. Top of the line, and it quits. I said, well, you know who gets her? He said, well, who? I said, the devourer gets her. And, we think as Christians that the devil just double-crosses believers. I want to tell you, the devil double-crosses his own people. And the devourer got her. And I explained that to him. He says, that's got to be true. He said, there's no other, it's almost supernatural how everything she gets just turns to crud. And the devourer is out there. And God says that he will protect us from the onslaught of the devil economically. Amazing passage. Okay, then he says, and all the nations will call you blessed, for you will be a delightful land, says the Lord of hosts. And the last promise there is that when we tithe, when we give God 10%, not only does he pour the blessing out on us, but the rest of the world will notice there's something different. And that's why I said earlier, I believe one of the keys to help making America Orthodox, to baptize this country in that holy faith, one of the keys is tithing. Because people are going to take notice of the fact that we're together as a spiritual nation, a holy nation, Peter calls us in his epistle. And all I can say is, I believe this is the normalcy of giving. And just on a practical note, not only is it God's will, but it keeps us from constantly getting hit on. I spoke to right after we were brought into the church, I was asked to speak to a group in one of the other jurisdictions. And I'd been in the church about 6 months, and I tell you, it was embarrassing. It was about a 2 or 3 day retreat, and every meal, the bishop would go through the crowd, every meal, and hit on the people for money. And I had with me one of our deacons and another priest, and we sat there and we said, this is absolutely robbing not only the bishop of his dignity, it robs the people of it. People didn't want to go eat. Because every time they sat down, they were there with that funny little stovepipe hat with the banner on it, and he was holding it out, collecting money. And thank God that doesn't happen in our archdiocese. But the fact is, so often, I think our giving, instead of being joyful, which it's supposed to be, Scriptures say the Lord loves a cheerful giver, and the word cheerful there in the Greek is the word hilarious. we're really supposed to, be excited and happy about giving. But often it just becomes a drudgery because every time we turn around, it seems that, somebody's out there trying to collect money. And when the people tithe, that just isn't necessary. That constant hit. I know in our parish, our men love to get together. And the reason is because we just get together to have good, we have some teaching and then some time for dinner usually and drink some beer and watch some football or something. And there's never a fundraiser for our men. Why? Because the needs are met because the people tithe. And so Metropolitan Philip asked me to talk about this at the conference. When was that? In October. And I honestly was a bit hesitant. I remember the story I told about, afraid I'd be the Antiochian proto-martyr. But I'll tell you, the people, didn't you feel they were receptive?
Oh, absolutely.
I was honestly shocked. But I think our people are starting to see that if we mean business, that we're going to have to realign the way we give. And instead of this nickel and dime every time we turn around, let's just tithe, this Nike ad, just do it, and give the bishop what he needs to run his operation, give the parishes what they need to run the operation locally. And I believe that it will literally impact this country if we'll do it. Because so often we don't do what we need to do because the financial base isn't there. I just think of my own work. We've never done missions and evangelism as a full-time thing in the Archdiocese. And back in '88, Metropolitan inaugurated this department. And I'm funded 60 grand a year, which covers salary for myself, part-time for my secretary, and a shared office that we have. And that I actually have to raise a little more to supplement that, but it basically pays the bills. And for 60,000 bucks a year, what have we gotten? And we got new missions all over the cotton-picking North America continent. And I am yet to have a man ordained to the priesthood and bring his people in that I've gone out and gotten. That's the amazing thing. Every single one of them are men that have come to me and said, I've read about you guys, or heard about you, or saw this and that on TV, and I'd like to be Orthodox. And it's happened, place after place. East Lansing, Michigan, large Protestant church has come in. Greetings.
Father?
How are you?
Ah, I'm sorry I'm late.
Milwaukee,
Place for you,
Boulder.
Yeah.
Smile, you're on candid camera. Good to see you.
Good to see you, Father.
How you doing?
Ah, how you been?
Coming, I'm fine.
Good to see you. Okay, growth you got going there.
Yeah. Just last night I got a call. There's an Episcopalian deacon in Omaha that came to our missions and evangelism conference this past year in Santa Barbara. He went home to try to persuade his rector to come into the church with him. He said he made his decision to become Orthodox. I'd never met the guy before. Former banker that is now full-time as a deacon. And he went home, the rector said, no, I can't do it. Well, last week, of course, the Anglican Church voted to ordain women worldwide. All came last night, rector's changed his mind. Now I can understand why I need to be Orthodox. And it goes city after city after city. And just Lord only knows what would happen in place of having a few thousand bucks, say to have $500,000 that we use for missions and evangelism, which is what we'd have if people tithe. And instead of one guy running around like I do, what if we had 4 or 5 or 6 priests doing this? And making contacts in all these, there's still many major cities in the country that don't have an Orthodox church of any kind. And that's just missions and evangelism, to say nothing about teaching, tapes. A lot of these Protestant ministries run their whole show on cassette tapes. We've got some of the best speakers in America. Father Tom Hopko, tremendous teacher. got some tapes out there. I'd love to have some money to be able to duplicate those things and pass them out free all over the country. Father Constantine's books ought to be out there. That we ought to have a national television program, the Orthodox Hour. Have some of these top-flight communicators. Some of our great choirs ought to be on there. And rather than people, tuning into Oral Roberts, they could tune into Orthodoxy. And who knows, all of what we could do if our people just simply said, okay, rather than nickel and dime, let's tithe and let's get on the map.
So why don't people tithe?
Well, I think a lot of the reason is they've not been asked to. There were several people that came up out at the village and said, I've never heard this before. I rode back to the airport with a man of quite some means. And he was actually angry. He said, why haven't we been told this before? He said, this makes all the sense in the world. And he was going to go home and see if he could swing his church around the tithing. And it really does make sense. But I think most of us have not even, considered it.
Let me just say something. I think historically, our people who came from the part of the Middle East, if we study about their history and about the life of the church existed for 2,000 years, and its mission on tithing by giving property. I know in our own home, in my grandfather and my father, that money was not available.
That's right.
They will plant the trees, and I know for sure, because I've seen the trees, these are property, these are property to the church. If they plant wheat, the first tenth of the wheat goes to the church. Oil to the church. Olives to the church. So through history, the church have survived our country, and our people, our fathers, your grandparents, did the same thing. Even some of them who have left property in the whole country. I'm sure some of our families here, their property are going to the church in Marja'iyun. Nobody is there, it's just given to the church. But because they labored out of their hands, coming to this country penniless, didn't have any dime, there was something to hold on the dime, to hold on the dollar. It's very precious to them. And so they did not live the experience of their parents and grandparents to give the way they have given. And if they go back today to look on the ancestry, they will find that there's a piece of property given by Ghulmiya, by the Hamsi, by the Farha, by the Naifi to the church. And so I think it takes education and patience and perseverance on this.
We have an article that you handed out, that was handed out at the symposium that talked on the very thing that you're talking about, Father. You had the one on tithing with a picture of the $100 bill, and then on the back clip to it, I can't remember who the article was written by, but it was written by a convert talking about the Middle Eastern traditions and how they changed. And then it says, but is tithing appropriate in America today? And the answer was absolutely yes. And he gave all those reasons. So maybe we could copy that. I have it. I know Paul has it. We can run a copy of that.
Imagine if you have
if
you have 50 acres of land planted wheat and give us 10th of the wheat, what we're going to do? What the church will do with it? Or olive, it would be difficult, They will do something with it, but we don't have the property to give to the church, or give a home or an apartment to the church. Some people are doing it, not Orthodox, maybe they are some,
but the only way we can do it now, Father, here in America today is not give maybe give property to the church, but you can't give crops to the church.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
And so the only way we can do it today is with the dollar.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. We live in a new world.
Convert ourselves to the dollar, and that's the only way we can really, I think, do it in our church today. And you correct me if I'm wrong. And I
it is the legal tender,
One of the things that the bishop said, and he said it on tape, so anybody could listen to it, was if the churches would do what Father Peter says, and that is tithe and tithe to the archdiocese, he'll never send us another letter that asks for any funds to go to him. And he made it clear it doesn't go to him, it goes to the archdiocese for the work we're talking about. But how many times have we read letters in board meetings, and they're not asking for donations. as Franklin always says, it's a demand. I mean, we're going to give it, and he has to write these letters, so it stirs up an ill will. And not just in our parish. I mean, everybody there talked about that. Into his face. They said, every letter you send us is asking for money. And he said, that's right. But if we'll change the thinking, he'll never send out another letter. And that's, yes.
I have a problem with this. Now, let's just say a man makes, just take a number, $50,000 a year. So you're asking him to give $5,000 to the church. Net, he's hit by the United Way and at least 50 other organizations in a year's time to give to, many of which are very good organizations. Now, what is he supposed to do? Say, no, I gave all mine to the church? Or is he to take that $5,000 and give $3,000 to the church and use the other $2,000 if he decides he wants to tithe and dispense that among different other agencies?
Good question.
Question.
Good question.
What we do at home is we run our community charitable giving through the church. So that people give to the church, and then the church in turn has a community charitable outreach. And I'll tell you, the good thing that does is it screens out all the bogus stuff. Because, for example, in United Way, as good as that outfit is, they give tens of thousands of dollars every year to Abortion on Demand. And that way you screen out that junk. And so when people come to my door, what I say is we do all of our giving through the church, and I ask them to make an appeal to the church that our council can decide on whether or not they want to support it.
Does your church tithe? Does your
Yeah.
church, it tithes then? And
Our people tithe to the church, and then the church tithes to the archdiocese, and then we do a lot of local stuff. For example, we have a food bank that we run for about 200 people, take advantage of that thing every week. And we distribute food from the church, and that's paid for through the tithing. Another thing we do, by the way, is if there's a family in the church in need, because of the tithe, there's the money to help those people. And I don't know how it's been here, but boy, this recession has really, really hit us. And because the people tithe, there's the finances available to be able to help some of these people that are out of work. We got white-collar guys starving to death out there who are out of work. And so it's been a toughie. But the money's there to do that, yes.
My feeling is there may be some that don't know about tithing, but to me, what they're thinking, I think it's a problem in the thinking. They're thinking of practicality, you know, I'm trying to set aside for a rainy day, and practically or worldly speaking, there's just, tithing doesn't make sense to a lot of people, I'm saying. I think, don't you think there needs to be a spiritual recognition grounded in the Bible that, I mean, to me, that's what has to transform the thinking spiritually before they can dig in the pocket to tithe, because it doesn't make sense that I have enough to give 10% away until they understand what this says. To me, is that not the target that our people need to be told about versus maybe anything else?
You'd be taught, not told. People need to be taught.
Well, I don't well, I guess I'm saying is until they make the spiritual decision.
Yeah, I agree with
You know
that.
what I'm saying? It's not going to happen just from hearing it. They have to then take the teaching and say, okay, I'm going to make that spiritual commitment.
Well, I had an Anglican bishop, and he had some bad habits, but this was an excellent one. Somebody I remember came to him one time, and they said, Bishop, I want to give a large amount of money to the church. And he said, do you tithe? And the man stammered a little bit and said no. And the bishop said, all right then, first meet your obligation, then I'll talk to you about gifts.
That's
You're not giving to the church. You owe God your 10. Pay that, then we'll talk gifts.
Look, you know, what I've found is, this is funny, it talks about the tithe as the first fruit. In other words, you give it from off the top. And in my house, if I get my check and I pay, you know, Sears and then the gas company and the light bill and the cable and all this, I promise you at the end of the month I don't have enough to tithe. But if the first check I write is St. Athanasius Church, invariably I have money at the end of the month to meet my obligations. And to me it's a discipline. The other day I get paid on the 15th. I got paid early this time because I was gone on the 15th. So I deposit the thing, move the decimal point over one notch, and just write a check out immediately. And then I, obviously have money to pay the rest of the bills. There are some things I don't do because I can't afford them. And so you do make adjustments. I almost never buy a new car. I can't afford a new car, but I can sure afford a nice used car. So I drive a nice used car. That doesn't kill me. My kids, 6 kids, they've all worked to help put themselves through school, which I think is part of their education anyway. I'd have been a dumb drunk if my folks had sent me through college. I promise you, I wouldn't be here tonight. I had to work my way through, and frankly, it was that helped me to make it through college. So we've made some adjustments as a family. But I find if we take it off the top and do that first, and let me underscore again and back up what you said, it is a spiritual thing. I tithe essentially for one reason, because I love God. I know the Bible says it. I know all the practical arguments, but when push comes to shove, I just do it because I love it. And then all of that other stuff fits in around that. Bob?
If somebody is, really wants to follow the Lord along this line, and they feel it's God's teaching for them, they should do it, and they're going to give to the church a tithe, etc. And several of us here are like professional people, have their own offices, have their own businesses, dentists, doctors, lawyers, professional people, or business owners. How do you determine the tithe for that kind of individual who is not receiving a weekly, bi-weekly, monthly check? When you receive a check, I think it's easy.
Yeah, it's
Running an
very
office.
easy.
But I don't know about you, Paul, but, and I've gone up and down this. I've tithed also all my adult years. But I've gone to a place where I tried to tithe on my office income. I mean, my total gross income. And for years I did that, but other times now, it's a little bit lean sometimes. I can't do that anymore. But I'm just saying to tithe on your office income, to me, and I'm just trying to parallel here from our offices that are security people, a lot would be similar. That overage is a very, very high factor.
You tithe every month to the Oklahoma Tax Commission and IRS, and so do I.
That's right.
That's tithing.
Right, it is.
More than a tithe.
It's under compulsion, but it's
That's not
tithing.
voluntary.
That one's not voluntary.
That's not voluntary.
That's not serving the Lord either.
That's season.
Anyway, a
Father,
practical question. I'm just trying to be practical.
Well, I would put it back on what does the government tax you on? Maybe use that as a guide. Having never owned my own business, I'm not quite sure how to answer your question.
Well, I suppose the question, the more succinct, is that if a person came to you and said, Father, here's my paycheck. Let's say my gross paycheck is $3,000, but my net is $2,250. What do I pay the 10% on?
I pay it on the 3. It says Abraham gave him a tenth of all. That's gross. And then what I do is unexpected money is like I belong to Order of St. Ignatius. And on paper I probably can't afford it. But I say, Lord, I'll do it, and then you bring the money in that I need. And I haven't missed a payment yet.
But let me
I
ask
do it off the top.
Let me ask you, okay, when you give 10% of your income, you give it to the church, whether it's St. Ignatius, whether the ladies, or whether it is food for 100 people, or just give it to St. Ignatius, St. Athanasius, and St. Athanasius give the $500 on your behalf to. What have to be very clear.
What I do personally, I tithe 10%.
We have lots of obligations that we do, and I can tell you my own. I I know what my income is, but in the end of the year when I see what I do, not only to my parish, which is very limited things, but other obligations pertaining to my missionary activities in the life of the church, my family, extended family. When you add this up, it goes even beyond 10%.
Yeah, it does.
Sometimes it goes even to 20%. But one time I wanted to share it with one of individual to know that we do these things, we have obligations. But does that considered?
I think it's very legitimate to figure your tithe up and take out of the order in the local parish and everything. Personally, what I've tried to do is 10% of the parish, and then over and above that is food for the hungry, the Order of St. Ignatius.
So that is gifts.
Is gifts, free will offering. And honestly, men, what I try to do is sock 10% away for retirement. Try to live off the 80. 10 to God, 10 to mutual fund program for retirement. Because frankly, there's just not going to be much if I don't do that. Social Security isn't going to do a lot. And then try to live off the 80. And that's worked real well.
Let me just make an observation. I was brought up in the Baptist church and observed the preaching on giving and tithing. And most Baptist churches are party to the cooperative program, which they send 10% or more or less.
Yeah.
And I've been at St. Elijah here. This is my 12th year or 13th year, I'm not sure. But I think there is a great deal of giving at the church here.
I know that.
We don't call it tithing, but I think if people begin to do proper accounting of the amount of money that is given by lots of people, you'll be amazed that it is much greater than the tithing that goes on at Baptist churches. That's my observation, at least at St. Elijah. There's a great deal of giving that goes on in so many different ways.
Sure.
And the church, looking at our anemic budget, I think our church gives quite a bit to the archdiocese, almost 10% or more. And then lots of individuals, send money to the archdiocese in so many different ways. So the thing I notice at St. Elijah and the Orthodox Church is really, we don't do the bookkeeping. It's not very neat. The giving is not very neat in terms of 10% or tithing, but there is lots of love, lots of giving here that goes on. At least that has been my observation.
And I'm sure from what I know of you all, I agree with that completely. I think the average Orthodox person probably does come close to giving 10%. But the thing you keep hearing the complaint about is that every time I turn around, there's another done letter in the mail, or somebody else got their hand out. And to me, the beauty of the tithe is it takes that harangue out of there. We give it, we know, this is God's will, we give it joyfully, and then we're not faced with this constant barrage thing.
I have very, very difficult time with myself to ask the congregation for this drive or that drive, or believe me,
it's hard.
Even when you have the Olympics, or even having somebody to speak about the big sale in church, or it just is very, very hard for me, because this is not the place for it. You just do it and you give it, and God only recognizes that. See, so I try to reconcile myself, and sometimes when I say an appeal, I don't know how the people in the pew, Grinch, has another appeal, but though as Orthodox we don't appeal too much, but if we are Presbyterians or Baptists, we sit on watch TV, every program and every service, there is a very stern appeal for giving and for sharing. For me, as a priest, maybe I have a complex with it, but maybe it's the nature of the Orthodox, I don't know.
Yeah. I just hate it. I was in the professional fundraising field for 3 years, by the way. I worked for Memphis State University as the Director of Development. So I've done a lot of it, and frankly, I hate it.
I can say this, since like Nabi said, every year, thank God, you know, the church is growing and our people are growing spiritually, and we can see their gift. Also, their giving is cheerfully. I have people who, on the first month of the month, they send their gift to the church, and it's become part of their discipline of life. At the same time, I see a genuine increase, genuine giving in a private way, in such a hidden way, so the left hand does not know what the right hand is giving, or vice versa. I'm very proud with the Church of St. Elijah. Really, they're trying their best, and George and David invited, a couple of years back, Stan Deerduff, who was instrumental in the Episcopal Church to speak on this particular subject, and I think it was a very good encounter with him. And we had George Dibbs to speak from California. So I think it takes education and patience, and I'm very happy that you are here. You know, we won't make this very rigid kind of meeting,
Yeah,
but
Father, one of the things that I think at least our church is deficient on, and I'm not sure, I haven't seen, and maybe there is, I know there's got to be a program, there's literature available, is encouraging the membership to remember their church and their wills. Little estate plan. And it's so, it's very, I think it's a lot more assets that could be obtained through this kind of program to provide, you know, more of an endowment type thing for your church, you know, an asset-based type thing, as opposed to tithing, which I don't know how that's treated on the accounting on those, but tithing to me would go to the, I guess, the operating capital of the church versus the program to build the asset base of the church, which I really think we've missed the boat on. And we need to, you know, we talked about this before, but maybe that's kind of the program we really need to push. To me, I can't imagine anyone in this room not being willing to execute a codicil of their will, giving even a small percentage of the net assets of their estate. You know, and I think if we had some kind of a drive in that regard, you know, we really need to do that. And maybe other churches do, but that's something I thought that really needs to be addressed more. Do you see that, Father, that other?
In fact, I believe the Metropolitan is just now getting a program underway for deferred giving. When I was with the university, we did that.
It just makes sense to me.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
So that's the whole program of endowments of Orthodox.
Right.
That's the whole program.
Yeah.
Let me tell you a story from my profession about the man that was choking and was almost ready to die. The doctor, you know, miraculously saves his life. The man looked at him and says, "How much do I owe you?" He said, "I'll tell you how much you owe me. Why don't you just give me half of what you would have given me just before you thought you were going to die?" And you can translate that to what we're talking about. If money is your stumbling block, how much would you be willing to give God to keep your soul from going to hell?
What will a man give in exchange for his soul?
The answer is the whole thing.
That's it.
Yes.
With reference to your conversation a moment ago about your solicitation and your drive experience, the question comes to my mind, timing. What part of the year, or when are the collections the greatest, and when do people respond to tithing better, or is there a pattern?
When I was in the field, I assume it's still true, November is a good giving month, February tends to be a good giving month, and April.
April?
Mm-hmm. Believe it or not.
Taxes?
They're used to giving.
I think they're just used to giving at that point. People give end of the year gifts, but of course in tithing we're talking about a regular
Well, I understand that, but I mean, there are times when they'll be greater, is that right?
Yeah,
Well, and you say that November's better than
November
December?
tends to be a good month.
Over December?
Because it's Thanksgiving.
I don't know why, you know, it's just, I don't know the answer.
It's Thanksgiving.
Yeah, that may be.
Well, the other comment, go ahead,
No,
George.
go ahead, finish it.
The other comment I wish to make is, and this is kind of on the humorous side, but had that person bought Sears products, their washing machine wouldn't have gone out.
Yeah, that's
Okay?
true. The devourer won't get Sears, huh? Yeah.
I have a couple comments, and I know that a lot of times I talk about this with these guys, and it seems out of line. But and with what Nabil was saying is, yeah, we seem to have a lot of good givers. But I posed the question that if our parish would tithe 1% or 2%, we wouldn't have to worry about our $220,000 budget. Now, yes, we have people that respond when the need comes up. And I think a lot of times we depend on when there's a need for the money. If the air conditioning goes out and we're short money, we can come up with the money. I would like to see us not have to worry about those special occasions and feel like that if we could somehow, and I know there's a lot of shaking in the chairs tonight, just like when Paul and I were listening to you at the village, I think there was a lot of shaking in the chairs. Not really feeling comfortable about, well, you know, what is 10% of what? The same questions are asked tonight that were asked at the village by all over America. The same questions. Is it off the gross? Is it off the net? Does all the what we give included in it, or do we separate out? All those same questions were asked and answered. My feeling is that as a group, as a parish, we have to decide, will it work? And my question is, how do we handle the groups of people that don't feel it'll work?
Well, David, isn't it an individual matter, though?
You can't.
Well, that's always been our scapegoat.
No, I
That
mean,
we make it an individual thing. What you give is your business and what I give is my business, and we don't want to talk about it, but yet this is coming out, for us, it's like it's coming out of the closet. Because we've never talked about, well, you should give such and such, or you should give this, and how you calculate it is your business. We've never talked about that, ever.
true, but giving is a private matter.
But isn't this what we're talking about, as though it's instruction, teaching, giving guidance? You gave comments, people have never heard about it. And I want to back up what you were saying David, because I'm a new guy here at the church. And for 20 years, I've belonged to two different churches that taught and did tithing. And they very seldom raised finance. You didn't hear about money very much. Just a couple times a year, it's talking on tithing, and that was it. And when I came to our parish, and I don't just want to disagree with you at all, I want to say my first reaction to our parish the first few months is we are a very expensive church. When we have our gatherings, our get-togethers, and our time we're a family church banquet, boy, my kids were all home. I've got 4 grown, and Josh, my wife was alive, 7 of us. I couldn't afford to come. I've got a good income to come to a church banquet. You follow me? I've offered to give money to you, Father, remember? Special gifts aside, just for the people who could not afford to come. Because I think we have a very expensive church to attend. So I've tried to give money to Father so that he could help people who couldn't afford it. Well, my point is that if we tithe, then we would not have to have high fees on many of these things. And it's a family activity, like the church family. And it doesn't cost as much. And we include everybody. And nobody's excluded because of finances. Whereas right now, I think a lot of people are excluded because of finances.
You could change the menu from Jadda. You wouldn't have to have $15.
Yes.
I don't want to give away anything on my homily, but I will share something. If I could call the IRS tomorrow and say, what would you settle for and what I owe you? And they'd say 10%. Boy, I'd have a check written before I hung up. What do I owe to God? Everything. Everything I've got comes from God. It is God that giveth thee strength to get well. He says, I'll settle for 10%. Boy, that's a bargain.
But the prevailing message here is the same message that we heard 2 years ago from Stan Deerduff, and we've heard again from George Dibbs, and we're hearing it again from you about the 10%. Now, the question is, how does the stewardship committee go about implement, how are they going to convey, how to teach that it is a spiritual thing? And what we're saying here is that you do have to put the cart before the horse. In reality, that is the horse. The giving is the horse that pulls the cart. But how do we teach that? I don't know, when I sit down, and it's a family thing, we talk about how much money we're going to give tithe to the church. How do we decide, how do we make up our minds without knowing that giving 10% of our total salary is going to be not only helpful for the church, but we're going to be able to pay the rest of our bills, and it's through faith. It's through the spirituality that Gary's talking about. And how do we convey that without actually experiencing? Stan Daredevil, the gentleman that spoke to us before, he revealed, not exactly, but he gave much greater than 10% because through his giving of 10% more, he has got more. He can't handle all this given to him. So he just gives more and more and more, probably greater than 20%. Well, even though that's not supposed to be the motivation behind giving, it has to be something, a concept that's perceived and believed that if you give 10% when you're barely meeting your bills right now, that you're going to be able to continue meeting without any problem. Now, how do we do that?
That is where faith comes in. God simply is true to His word. I'll never forget, I don't tell this story often. The first house I bought was right after my Campus Crusade years. And I mean, we didn't have a pot to pee in, okay? We had nothing.
Or a window to throw it out.
Yeah. And I needed a down payment of $2,000. And I had quit asking, used to ask rich people to pray for me. Jeez, it was such a game. And I said, God, I'm not going to do that anymore. So I got my Campus Crusade staff together, all of whom were poor. And I said, I'm going to ask, you're the only group I'm going to ask to pray. And a guy followed me out the door, and he said, you got the money. And I said, what do you mean? He said, I just inherited some money. And he said, I'd like to give you $2,000. If you can ever pay it back, fine. If you can't, that's just fine. And I couldn't believe it. Well, we had our down payment. So we got the house, back when $19,000 would buy a Victorian house in Chicago. And the guy took the offer way below what he'd asked for it. And on the way to the bank to close, I had $1. That was back in the days you could keep $1 in your account, remember, to keep it open. I had $1, a wife, and 4 kids. And we had, the food was gone, everything. And on the way to the bank, I prayed, I grabbed her hand with my wife. I said, Lord, somehow give us $100 so we can just put groceries on the shelves. After the closing, I went back down to the car, headed out of the bank, and the former owner comes running toward my car with a great big smile on my face. I said, he's got $100. I can tell by the look in his face. And the guy said, you know, I never cleaned the attic out. It's a mess. I apologize. And this will more than cover calling a junk man. It was $100. I said, Bob, you're an answer to prayer. He wasn't even a Christian. And in fact, tragically ended up on drugs. But the point is, that kind of thing has happened over and over and over. The Lord, you see, you can't outgive God. You just can't do it.
Is that where you got that
And,
line?
I gave it to him. Oh, that's an old line, but boy, it's true. You can't outgive Him. And, I mean, older and older again, the Lord has rolled us out.
I want to take issue with something that you said, Nabi. I think that things have gotten better, but by no means do I think our parish is even close to realizing a tithe. I mean, it's not even close. And secondly, it's almost as if whenever you mention it, people don't want to hear it. They don't want to talk about it. They're tired of talking about it. They're tired of reading about it. It's kind of lonely, you know, talking about it all the time. I feel like that what probably could work as well as anything for our parish, we try to teach and we try to tell, and then that works a little bit. I think we need leaders. We need people to lead by example. You know, it's going to be a top-down process, in my opinion. But if I'm Mr. No Dollars, and I'm looking at Mr. Megabucks, and Mr. Megabucks doesn't give a tithe, why should Mr. No Dollars give a tithe?
But it's a personal thing.
I know it is, I know it is. And I'm not saying I take it that way. I'm just saying that there's people in our church, I feel like, that don't do it for whatever reason, and we've certainly given them every opportunity to know what to read. We encourage them to read Scripture. We've quoted Scripture. We've told it to them. We can't understand it for them, but yet they don't do it. I feel like that if we did have more leadership, it would happen.
We need to, is it beyond reason? But what you're saying, that we need to have people actually admit or confess that, yes, they don't have to say how much their 10% is, but yes, I believe this. But I do give 10%, but they don't have to say how much.
I don't think that hurt anything. I mean, just like Father Peter sat here and said he's tither.
It's nobody's business what that 10% is, but the fact that they have accepted the concept and they're carrying that concept out.
But wait a minute. Then the B's point does become germane.
Which is?
If I give 10%, you're not going to know whether it's 10% of net or gross. There's only two people that are going to know about it. And the most important one is God. He's going to know whether I'm tithing or not. So what difference does it make if you know what their true income is? If they're going to cheat and not give it, okay?
That's not.
They're only cheating.
The point is, no, they don't say how much they're giving. It says, I'm giving 10%. The fact that they've accepted the concept, and that is it. And then when one person accepts the concept, another person says, well, perhaps I'll give 10%. And that becomes, contagious, and it spreads through. Because very few people want to be the leader or the first one when it comes to giving money. They want to match whatever someone else is doing. Well, if someone else is doing something, then I'll go ahead and do it.
Yeah, not dollars, but
just the concept.
Yeah.
No, I don't talk about the actual dollars, but it's the concept of giving 10%.
We're going to go 5 more minutes, and we're going to have blessing. We have food over there, and then you can talk individually on the subject or other subjects. 5 more minutes, okay?
I think St. Paul,
Go ahead.
St. Paul says that first they gave themselves to God and then to us by the will of God. Now everybody, I think I've heard this, the same thought from everybody here. It is a spiritual thing.
Sure it is.
And I hope people are listening to some of the homilies, by the way, the Father's giving on Sunday morning, because he's trying to tell us this. You know the faith of the church. It's got to be a spiritual thing. That's where we've got to operate from. That you're right, George. We've got to show people that it's an obligation to God. It is a personal thing. We can't go look at their bank account. They've got, I'll take you guys' word if you tell me. You don't have to tell me this time. But that's where it's got to all start. To love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy strength, with all thy soul, with all thy mind, and let's throw in all thy pocketbook, and we'll be all right.
I think part of the problem is that we use that almost as an excuse, look at the other person, and we're worried about they're not going to comply. I mean, it's
See, that can't be in there.
it's faith. All Christianity is based on faith. So this is another facet of it. Are we going to discard this one and pick this one? It's like, okay, so-and-so may say they do it and don't do it. Can we be worried about that?
No. Not at all.
And another part of the problem is, we've published at times, I don't know about specific amounts, and almost embarrassing people into giving and that kind of thing. And I don't think that works either. It's 10% of each person. It's just as hard for this guy down here as it is for this guy up here. It's a percentage. It's not an amount.
That's right.
So, I don't...
But it's the concept of someone's actually doing it. That someone is actually doing it, that it is actually happening. And that the parish is aware that there are people that are actually doing it. And they're saying...
That's why I think we need to hear from the spiritual reference, because whether somebody else does or doesn't do it isn't going to help that person.
Well, but you do need to help. You got to be talking it. I mean, it's part of your job is to spread the word.
That's
you
right.
got to be talking.
I'm all
it.
for the teaching and hitting them.
But I mean, we got to be talking amongst ourselves. If you believe that, it would help tell people that.
I had a funny comment that gets made, and George and I talk a lot about this, And these guys hear this a lot from us, and so it's not the impact that if someone from outside comes and talks to us about. But the feeling I have is it's personal, the bill, it's spiritual, but as George says, it's our job as Christians to follow what the Bible says. And the Bible isn't a cafeteria. And we can't pick and choose out of the Bible what we think is appropriate for today. And that's where I hear a lot of people say, man, the tithe was thousands of years ago. That's not appropriate today in our church. And my feeling is it's not a cafeteria. And so as Christians, what we try to do is help each other be better Christians. Look, I need you guys' support as much as I want to give you my support. And if that means supporting me into following what the Bible says, whether it be on tithing, whether it be on any other topic in the Bible, that's what I need. And so what I like about it is it's a family, we need help. We don't want to feel like we're out on that limb by ourselves.
Jeffrey didn't say anything.
Father, you mentioned that some other churches were going into the 10% to the Archdiocese. Obviously, those churches don't know each member is giving 10%.
That's right.
How did they do that? I mean, what did it take, and how do we do it? Maybe that's the way to start, is to have the church give 10% to the Archdiocese, and then...
That's exactly what I'd suggest, is that if you all as the council would say, okay, we believe tithing is biblical, it is the spiritual way of giving, we'll commit to do it to the Archdiocese, and we'll encourage our people to do it, and we'll do it. And the hardest part is to start. Because you really, the devil will get up there on your shoulder and say, man, you're gonna go hungry, kids will be destitute, wife will take in laundry, honest, that's the hardest part. And what I do is what Malachi says, test him. I'd say, okay, God, I'm gonna do it 6 months. And just see what happens.
Not give it 6 months to have the windows open and pour down the blessing so much that I can't store, but give it 6 months to be able to fulfill my obligations and still get have all my needs taken
I'm going to
care of.
start right now, and I'm going to do this for 6 months. That's the way I'd start.
And you say that we're not going to get those little letters from the Archdiocese saying that we've got to give this to the missions fund and we've got to give this to that. I don't believe
I didn't
you.
say that, Franklin.
But if you write to the Metropolitan and say, our church is going to shift into a tithing rather than a tray and a dues mode, you will not get the done letters for the trays, and the 20 bucks a year is a thing of the past.
You may get the letters, but you have the money to cover it.
Yeah.
What difference does it make if you get it?
The tray is how you collect the
If
money.
you had- if you tried it.
You
See,
give
what
them
he
10%
does,
to
rather
the
than-
Archdiocese, and then you're using the other 90% to run your church. Now, where do you have the money, Gary?
When does it happen? You see, that's why you try them. I promise you, the Lord is faithful.
If we did this, those minutes in the church were committed to, couldn't we help each other do that? Like I don't know what your church does, but I know the Mormon church, they help each other establish budgets and help each other work on these things. Could we not commit to tithe and help each other?
Yeah.
You don't help people in the church to know how to do these things, even how to budget so that they may save money. They may save more money than what they're giving. Just by that's okay.
We're going to take a break now, and we're happy to bless whatever we have on the table. And there's some food there, and there's some refreshments over there. Please make yourself at home. All right?
It talks about
the ministries?
ministries.
I have it.
The
I
one
gave
with
it.
the altars.
Yeah, I
The
have it.
ancient altars.
I gave it to Father Macaulay. I have a couple of copies in church. Yeah.
Okay, good. They devoted the cover of this issue to the number of evangelicals and charismatics that are going Orthodox. And there's a whole section in there on us and the Antiochian Archdiocese. And I've never seen anything like this. This is about the 6th major article this year that's come out, not only in the religious magazines, but some of the secular magazines.
Yeah, ministries really. I was surprised to have something on the Orthodox Church, Antiochian Church in it.
See, these guys, in their tradition, they're anti-liturgical or anti-sacramental, they're anti-hierarchical, and in the article, they're saying we got to look at all of it. So somehow we're blessed to live in a time when people are really looking at the Orthodox Church.
Who's that professor from I read somewhere? Just recently ordained in Denver, Colorado.
Oh, Les Bundy.
Who's he?
Les Bundy is an Episcopal priest who for years has taught at, what's the name? Regis College in Denver. It's a Roman Catholic school. And about 10 years ago, the guy started writing icons. And little by little, he's looked into Orthodoxy. I met him about 6 years ago at the Denver airport. He had read some news release that we had come into the church and called and asked if we could meet. And 6 years ago, he and his wife came to the airport. He was very warm toward Orthodoxy. She was still really nervous on giving up, her Episcopal identity to be Orthodox. But this year, after 6 years, which is why we can't give up on people, by the way, this professor and his wife were brought into the church, and now he's been ordained priest. He's an Orthodox priest, and he's assisting Father Connolly there at the St. Mark in Denver.
Regis College is ran by the Jesuit order.
Yeah, I believe that's right.
I know it is.
And he's had a real impact there.
Regis College is.
Oh, Regis College.
You never know what the impact will have. We had
No, Todd looked at it and I
a
said,
lady, she's head of the religion department, those who do. But she called us, wanted to bring one of the classes, and she toured the church. I toured the church, and then she sent me back a letter and said, Father, would it go right if I brought the classes to attend Vesper service?
there's a very strong disposition.
She wants to bring her whole classes.
By the way, the other day,
Is no slipper.
65 Wheaton College kids visited our
Without the
mission.
jacket.
Now, the point is that I'm going to refer to you as he as a convert. But you converts will, if that's the word, will gather in a lot of people.
Yeah, but see, where we're gathering is the churches that you and your forefathers built. So, which says to me, we got to have each other. But see, apart from you guys, we wouldn't have anywhere to come. And so it's a team effort. And,
Well, I realize that too, but I say, but you're a leader in the respect that you're leading some of your own people into here. Your beliefs, your former beliefs.
We're not, and I'll tell you why.
You're not, or you are?
No, I'm going to tell you a true story. This unfortunately involves a Roman, but it's all right. We'll apply it to Orthodoxy. About 60 years ago, there was a Roman priest that had tremendous success at bringing people into the church. The bishop called the guy in and complimented him personally. So I want to compliment you on all these conversions. And the priest said, I have no idea what you're talking about. He said, you just got through a tour, said, didn't 500 people sign up for confirmation courses? And the bishop said, oh, you talking about what, the Holy Spirit?
Okay, all right.
Let me ask you a question, because now you've been visiting the Russians and the Greeks and the Serbians, the Bulgarians, the Albanians, all these various jurisdictions in America and in Romania, which I'd like you to tell us about your trip in Romania. But how are the other jurisdictions responding to this? Are they still in isolation? And if we close our doors, what will happen to those evangelicals or to those who are coming to our church? If we say if we close the doors of St. Elijah, for example, on the converts, what's going to happen?
Well, right now, the pace setter for evangelism and Orthodoxy in America is Metropolitan Philip. But there's one other primate that's really coming on, and that's Bishop Nicholas of the Carpatho-Russian Church. They've got a new program called Harvest 2000. By the year 2000, they've set a goal of 15,000 new charismatians and 10 new parishes. And frankly, I think they'll exceed the 10. They've already gotten 6 of the 10, and it's only 1992. But I've been doing some training programs with them. I'll be doing the 3rd one in April at the Antiochian Village. And this guy's pulling out all the stops, and boy, is he a good bishop.
He's like Maximus?
And Maximus also is very active in evangelism. And the OCA is doing more. I got a call today from my counterpart in the OCA. And they've done a lot more in the last few years.
The Greek church is not doing much?
Not much yet. See, but there's people in the church that are, like Bishop Maximus, Alex Veronis in Lancaster,
Yeah.
and others, Jimmy Corellis in Knoxville. There's a number of them, but the jurisdiction itself hasn't caught fire, I don't think yet.
Why is that?
Is the tape on?
Yeah.
Is there more interested in being Greek than they are in being Orthodox?
That's what I thought.
I hate to say that.
I said that before.
Turn the tape off and let him speak.
Yeah,
Well, I was gonna talk.